welcome.
Thank you so much
So
for
happy
having
to
me
have
on the
you.
show. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm so excited to hear all of your hats and everything you've got going
So
on.
many.
Take it from the top and really explain kind of what your day looks like. I've told them what you're doing. You're running this big company, you're CEO, woman in charge, but really take me through what your day looks like.
So this is kind of a hard question because I feel like my day changes day to day. Because we're still very much, we're not in startup culture anymore in my company. I feel like we've evolved past that because crazy enough, a year ago today, I had a part-time assistant who was a contractor. I had one part-time nurse practitioner who we do these things called life study groups. So I'll get up there and I'll teach and I'll call people and all this stuff. And I was kind of grooming her into teaching at the time, but she was mostly running the chat box. So like my business was the three of us. And so a year ago this time, it's almost May, it's almost graduation season, like the big time is coming up. And I was like, okay, like we need to hire some people. Like I don't know who, I haven't totally figured it out yet, but I was like, I know we're gonna need just like hands on deck. Like we're just gonna need help. And so we ended up hiring our first two contractors and they worked out beautifully and they still work for me today. And so we've evolved from me and two part-time contractors last year. We hired on two more after that. So now we have 15 people, I think seven of which I know, like I can't even believe that someday myself. So seven of which are full-time, the rest are contractors. But our contractors get a lot of flexibility in what they do. So some of them almost, I feel like, get close to full-time hours just on the sign up things and stuff that they pick up along the way. So to think even back a year ago today, where it was me and two part-time contractors, to today, like there are literally 15 of us running like full speed ahead all the time, kind of like breaks my own brain a little bit, but
Wow.
it's been such massive growth. I mean, our first year, because I started at the end of May of 2020. So first year, last year, I mean, we had big growth, but from last year's May to this year's May has been like wild growth beyond my wildest dreams. My day to day really revolves a lot right now, unfortunately, around the back end of the business. So when I started my business, I was like all front end all the time. And so what I mean by that is like I didn't have a website. I didn't have an email set up. I had like nothing. All I had was I made a Facebook group. And like you said, I gave it away to my classmates for free. And I said, I'll give you this little course I made for free if you'll just invite somebody into the group. And so I actually gave it to the first 100 people for free. And so it's literally from May of that year till September, I think it was. It might have been almost October, and we can talk about all the melodramas and lessons I've learned in business too. But I talked to every single customer on Facebook. People would send me private messages like, hey, I want your courses. I'd be like, okay, cool. You can pay me here, here, here. I wait for the payment to come through. And then I'd be like, okay, send me your email. Now I'll send you the courses. I have like these Zoom recordings, all this stuff. So to think about, that's what I did. And I was just like putting my face out there, talking to people literally nonstop. Like I remember the first day that I sold the course, my phone like exploded. Like I remember my husband, we were sitting in the living room. I was like, my phone just won't stop. Like I got overwhelmed. Like I threw my phone across the room. I was like, I can't even keep up with all these messages. Like what is happening to me right now? So to go from that to like now behind the scenes, I sit in a lot of like software meetings, legal meetings, accounting meetings. So now I'm like more on the back end, but I really keep up with the pieces that I truly, genuinely love. So between all those meetings, because that has to run for day-to-day operations of a business, but between all those meetings, I'm still doing my life study group, so I still teach there. I'm still talking to students in our private community. Still talking to students in Facebook, just not nearly as much as it was in the beginning. So I've told you a lot of things now, so I'm going to stop rambling, but it's been crazy. It's been so fun. I literally I just tell people all the time, like, I always dreamed of being an educator. And I always thought, I was very like stuck in that thinking of, well, like this has to be like, okay, I'll be an instructor, I'll teach some labs, I'll teach some courses, like maybe one day I'll become like an associate dean, the next step would be like a real dean, et cetera. So I feel like I'm living out my dream just like 20 to 30 years before I thought it was going to come, if that makes sense.
I love this. I love this. So what I love most about your journey is that you're describing what I hear about like from a lot of entrepreneurs, which is it was all me. I was doing it all by
Everything.
myself.
Oh my God.
And it was exhausting, right? And then you hear this, like, I always hear there's this pivot moment where, like, all of a sudden the business starts giving back to you and you're able to step away.
Yeah.
But your role then changes because you go from being really close to the front lines to now kind of being the general in the back, making all the decisive moves. The pieces, right? One of the things I'm thinking about as I'm hearing you, like, what preparation did you have to then move from being kind of one of the frontline workers, one of the soldiers of the front line, to now being the general in the tent, making all the rules and coming up with all the strategic moves that you have to make to keep growing the business?
I think there were two pieces, and their names are Becca and Anna. So I'll start with Becca. It was like November of the first year I was in business, and I was worn out because I was so terrified. This sounds so crazy now, but I was so terrified. We were already having so much success of quitting my full-time job and losing health insurance. I was like, how are we going to find health insurance? Like, what are we going to do? And that was like my hold up for quitting my job. And it took me quite some time after even I hired Becca on to quit my job. And I feel like we coached about that like every week. But in November of that year, I literally, and this will sound crazy too, but everything always comes full circle. A couple of years ago, when I was working as a nurse, I actually was having to commute in on the weekend. So it'd be almost a 2-hour drive. I would work Friday and Saturday, or sorry, not Friday. I worked Saturday and Sunday, and then I would drive back home. And I would stay with a friend on Saturday night, so I wouldn't have to make the 2-hour commute in between. And so when I was doing that, my nurse friend had an idea for a taco truck. And so she went and got a massage, and the lady who gave her a massage was talking about becoming a business coach. And so they did some business coaching together. And so I don't know why that like hung on in my brain, but it did. And so after I started my business in November of that year, I was just like so worn out because I was working 50 hours a week. And then every spare moment I had, I was working on my business. So like I would get up at 3 a.m. because I started teaching at 6:30. So I'd get up at 3 a.m. I'd work on my business till 6:30. And then when I got off work at 3 or 4 or 5, depending upon the day, I would work till 10 p.m. on my business. And then I would sleep very minimally and I would get up and start over. So like obviously like I was burning the candle at like literally every end the candle can burn. So I think Katie talked about one time a business coach for that taco van that she never fleshed out because Katie always has lots of fun ideas. So I was like, I'll just call that lady up. Like, I'll just like, is she even still doing business coaching? I don't know, but I'll just call her up and see what happens. And so, literally on a whim, I thought about it. We talked on the phone 2 hours later. I signed up for business coaching within 5 hours of that because luckily my husband was very supportive because it was a big investment for us at the time. But he was like, if you're going to make something of this business, and he said, I have full faith that you can. He was like, you need help and you need guidance for someone that's built a business. And nobody around us has any experience like that in any capacity. So I hired on Becca. In my first call with her, she said, I never do this. She said, but you need help like today. She's like, before we talk on the phone next week and do our next coaching call, like, I need you to go ahead and hire somebody. I don't care who that somebody is, but you need a virtual assistant doing admin tasks. Like, you need help on the clerical side, bare minimum. And she was like, and once you've hired that person, let's talk about hiring more people. So that was how I ended up with my first virtual assistant. And so the day that I hired the virtual assistant, which was literally like 2 days later, like I just put a posting up and I was like, please come take this job. I interviewed a couple people and I just hired somebody on the spot. I made a post on my Instagram and I was like, just hired my first employee. Like, I was super excited, right? Like, Jess.
Yeah, that's a big moment.
It was a big moment. It was huge for me because it was really hard for me to let anybody into anything I did. Just because you get like stuck in this mentality, and it's so silly looking back, like people can't do it as well as I can do it. But what people don't see is when you're doing 1,000 different tasks, you can give like 1% to each of those tasks, right? But if you have someone who's just working on email, just working on the Facebook group, it explodes, right? Like there's so much more room because they've got full focus on one task, whereas I was focusing on literally 1,000 tasks. So on top of my full-time job, as crazy as that sounds.
Yeah, this is nuts.
So it was nuts. And basically I made that little post about hiring my first employee, and somebody I used to go to school with reached out. She said, hey, we had connected ironically again because we went to nursing school together. And then we graduated nurse practitioner school at the same time. So everybody's in all the same student groups. So we kind of reconnected a little bit because she posted her study calendar and I used part of her study calendar to prepare for boards. And she's like, if you ever need any help, just let me know. I'm a stay-at-home mom right now. I just had my baby. Like, I've got time and I've got the flexibility to do it. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, I'll keep that in the back of my mind. And so just having the assistant alone, I literally within like 2 weeks of that had an idea for a brand new program that was going to be live. So everything I had up to that point was recorded. I'd always wanted to do something live. My students were asking for something live, but I never wanted it to be live in like the generic way that everyone else was doing it, if that makes sense. Because for me as a student, I didn't find value like in the conference style or webinar style review where it's just like 2 10-hour days back to back, your brain's exploding like
Yes, I did that.
I did that too. Oh my gosh, it was so painful. It was so painful when I was like, if I ever make anything live, I don't want it to be anything like that. That's my goal. And so in those first 2 weeks, I was like, I think I've got an idea that can work. I said, because I already know my courses are working because we can see all the student success in the Facebook group, which is really fun because every time somebody passes, they come in the group and post like, oh, I passed, blah, 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 all the good stuff, which I still read. And people don't believe me, but I still read every single passing post because it just brings my heart so much joy. Like, it's just like the core of everything that I want to do. I had the idea for something called the Life Study Group program, which is basically a 5-week program where I prepare you for boards and you get like little bits of video every day. So you get the recorded courses. And then we meet up every 2 weeks and I'm like, okay, you've already learned the content, right? So let's interact, let's talk about it, and let's make sure you know the content, right? So there are like all the things that I was needing as a student. I needed the structure of the calendar. I needed somebody to hold me accountable. We have a private community in there. So I needed someone reputable to answer my questions, and nobody out there was doing that either. I mean, it was all just like students on Facebook feeding off of each other. So, I mean, it was just like massive confusion. Really, the whole like bulk of the program is to build up confidence. So you've got the content, you can build up confidence in the sessions. Ideally, at the end of the 5 weeks, you take the test. So even just those 2 weeks, I had the idea for that. And so I called Anna up and I was like, hey, I've got this idea. It's kind of crazy. I don't know if it's going to work, but I think it's going to work. I think it's going to be slow to start out with because there's a lot of student education that goes into that program because it is so different. People are like, what are you doing? What's happening here? Like, they need education before they buy, obviously. I was like, but the one thing I do know is I'm going to need help. And so I was like, just come on, do the chat box with me and I'll do the teachings and we can talk about the rest later. And we've pretty much never looked back. She is now my chief operations officer. She rips and runs just as hard as I do every single day. We're like in constant communication. She was like, it was fate. She was the best decision I ever made for my business, was bringing her on with me. And so we've been able to grow at the rate we've had because I've had her alongside me as well. So I think Becca was a huge piece. Go ahead.
I want to stop you here because what you're saying is there's so many nuggets and we just have to pick them out before we walk past them. But what you're saying is that you had the right people on the bus, right? So like one of the big things about business and understanding how to grow a business is I hear over and over and over and over again that getting the right people to help you build is tantamount to anything. It's even more important than the mission. It's even more important than values at some points. It's really important who is working with you. And that's one of the things that I think is so cool that you're pointing out, but that also you just did it and you figured it out, right? And so a lot of people get so hung up and like, oh, but I don't have it all figured out. I don't have it all planned out. I don't really know if this is going to work. I think it might work. I don't know. Okay, so I will do nothing. And it's like, no, just go do it.
Yeah,
even
just
if
start.
you don't know it's going to work, just start. And so those are two nuggets that I'm hearing from what you're saying that are just so critical. And I really want nurse practitioners to understand that, especially those that are thinking about side hustles or businesses or what can I do or what can I build? Just go try it. And what's the worst that can happen? If it fails, you're right back where you were and you just try something else. Those are really awesome nuggets. And I guess my follow-up question from that, and again, we kind of go into your journey, is when did you decide that you wanted to become a nurse and kind of walk me through this point where you were like, because you didn't wake up one day, Sarah, and have a 7-figure business and people on the bus getting to the dream and the journey. You didn't just wake up with this stuff. You built it over time. And so take me a little bit about, I always want to hear people's like, I decided to become a nurse when stories. I think those are really cool. And then kind of walk me through, I guess we talked a little bit about, but just kind of walk me through quickly, like how you got to where you did start the business. Walk me through your process, because I really want to know when you were like, I think I'm just going to like give out this education to all my classmates. Yeah. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, how did
it sounds crazy to hear. So I think there's 2 parts to that. I decided to be a nurse. I decided to be a nurse, and then I had to re-decide to be a nurse. So what I mean by that is, like, growing up, both my parents are school teachers. They're middle school teachers. And so, like, I always envisioned myself, ironically, being a teacher. I didn't really necessarily think about medicine as much, but my parents very much pushed me. I grew up in Eastern Kentucky. It's very impoverished. It's very rural. They're like, education is your ticket, right? Education will always be your ticket. And so they didn't super love being teachers. There's a lot of politics that go on with being teachers. And so when I was going to college, they really pushed me, choose something in the medical field, because you're going to have job security, but you're also going to have the education piece. You're going to have opportunities. These are our big goals, basically. And so with their push, I knew there's no way, because I paid for school on my own. And I wasn't like eligible for like the grants and stuff and all that good stuff. My parents made just a little bit too much money. So I was going to be paying for school. I know. Yeah. Painful.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's like, we're not poor enough. Yeah. Thanks, but we're still not wealthy. Yeah.
So I paid for school on my own, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to afford medical school, and they probably wouldn't even be able to co-sign for those big of loans. So I was like, what am I going to do? Right. So I decided to be a nurse, but I always had like the teacher part of me, like in the back of my brain. And so I was halfway through nursing school, and whenever I tell the story, I always say there's 3 sides of a story. There's my side, their side, and the truth. But from my point of view, I had a panic attack during clinical one day. And so they pulled me aside after the clinical, and they're like, you know, you kind of struggled in this class. It was the first class I'd ever struggled in. It was the hardest one of all nursing school. So I like to throw the caveat out there, because
which class was it?
It was my med-surg class.
Oh, okay.
It was just, it was a doozy. It's a doozy.
So, it's a doozy to work in and a doozy to learn in.
Yeah. All the pieces, like the whole thing's a doozy. So I hadn't done so great on the first test. I had gotten by on the second test. I had the panic attack in clinical. And so basically they pulled me aside and they're like, do you really want to be a nurse? Like, do you think you have what it takes being this anxious? We have a lot of reservations about you continuing in this field with this level of anxiety. And so I had originally wanted to be a teacher. I kind of fallen into nursing. I thought it would be a good fit. And then I was challenged of like, is this something that's a good fit for you? And I couldn't even totally decide at the time. I was like, maybe I'll kind of switch majors. Maybe I'll try to pursue a master's in like higher education, public administration, like something along those lines. Like I just get through school and do more work, do more graduate school, that sort of thing. But ultimately what it came down to is I had those student loans. And so I was basically going to start from scratch if I started on any other degree. And so I was like, I've just got to do it. Right. And so the magic moment that happened is with the push of having people that didn't believe in me and didn't think I could do it because of my anxiety, I finally figured out that class. So, I mean, I didn't pass the first test. Literally, like the last test in that semester, I think I got like a 94% on or something crazy. Like I had figured it out. Yeah, I was like, oh man, I've got this. And so what that allowed me to do, because I figured out that tough class that everybody struggled with, is I got asked to be a tutor. And so when I started tutoring, I was like, this is it. This lights me up. I am so excited about this. I love to teach. Like, this is like, I feel it's the perfect mesh because I'm going to have this degree. I'm going to be able to be a nurse and do that. But I have this opportunity to educate on the side. And it was kind of my first side hustle, which I didn't realize at the time. And so I was like, okay, like I love tutoring. how do I keep doing this? And so
Yeah.
it got a little bit more complicated when I actually graduated school and became a nurse, because I was working night shifts, I was working crazy hours, all this stuff. And so I decided that even though I'd only been a nurse for just about a year, I was going to go ahead and get my master's in nursing education, because I was like, if I don't use it today, that's cool. I'll use it in the future. I know I will. Because I just wanted to like teach some clinicals or something. So I got that. But at that point, I was like kind of in the groove of school, right? And my employer was paying for my graduate education. So they paid for my master's in nursing education, and they were about to take away the payments for graduate school education. So I was like, if I'm going to do any more school, this is it. And so I signed up for my postmaster's program to be an FNP. Nice. And so I just kept rolling through. But what I always tell people too is, I told my now husband when I signed up for nurse practitioner school.
He was bae at the time. Now he's husband.
He was bae, and he survived. I was like, after he survived me in school for all that time and all the crazy hours I worked and planning a wedding, like we're soulmates. Like we're here for life. Once we figured all that out, God bless. So I don't even remember what I was saying now. I was just so distracted with my husband. But
no, you were saying that you were planning all this stuff and you were, where were you?
I think I know what I was going to say. I told him when I applied for school.
You're working, getting your postmaster's.
I told him that even if I never used the degree, I still wanted it, because I thought it was going to make me a better educator. And I genuinely meant that when I said it. And I still mean it today. And so...
You're talking about your the post certification that you got.
Because I was like, if I'm a nurse practitioner, it only makes me a better educator all the way around, even if I'm just teaching nurses. And so in the midst of getting that degree is when I actually started teaching nursing students. And I was like, yeah, this is it. Like, I thought this was it, but this is definitely it. Like, this lights me up. And being able to address people with anxiety and kind of have that one-on-one impact was really, really cool for me. I felt like, almost like tear up thinking about it, because I felt like I came full circle. But
that's really cool.
It is really cool. I can think of a couple of students in particular. I'll tell you just one story. Basically, I was in clinicals, and it was in a nursing home. So it was like fundamentals clinicals I was doing at the time. And it's so funny to like look back on yourself then. I'm sure she'll look back at herself and laugh about this, but she was so anxious to even like walk in the patient's room. And like where I went to school, that wouldn't have flown. That wouldn't have been a thing. So we literally we took a lap outside around the building to get her some fresh air. And I was like, okay, kind of walk me through what you think it's going to look like when you walk in there, like what you think you're going to say, what you think they might say, like the assessment that we're going to do together, like all these pieces. I said, run it out here with me, get your nerves out here, and then we can walk in and we can do it together. So I was like, you won't even be alone to do it, because I don't like students to do things alone anyways. And so even just giving her 5 minutes to kind of bring herself together, she was able to walk in the room. She did a really great job. I was like, I knew you could do a really great job. You just got so tangled up in your head, which is pretty much what happened to me when I was preparing for my board exam, because I had an excellent education, like an excellent nurse practitioner education. It was top notch. But that board exam wigged me out. I don't know like what it was. I don't know if it was just the pressure. I don't know if I just had a lot of things going on at one time, because I was working 2 full-time jobs at the time and preparing for boards. There were lots of pieces there. I'm a workaholic, if you can't tell.
Sarah, you're like, I was gonna say, you're like high octane in everything you do.
No,
I was working 2 jobs.
I'm running.
I wasn't sleeping.
No, it's fine. I'm just running all the time. And so I got to a point where like I was making myself physically sick over the exam. I tried to do every review I could get my hands on, just like all the pieces. And then I was so aggravated when I took the exam, because I took the exam in less than an hour. It's 175 questions. So obviously like I knew my stuff, right? And I was like, why in the world was I this strung out over this? Like, this wasn't that bad. I knew all the content even from school. Like, I needed to refresh a little bit to take the exam, but I got the content in school. Sure. I just needed the anxiety piece. And so that's how I was like, okay, I was the first person in my class to test. Cool. Let me just put out this little review and see if I can help anyone else with anxiety, because at that point in time, I kind of felt really alone again. It kind of reminded me of being in nursing school, because I was like, I'm super anxious, but it's like nobody around me is super anxious. And what I realize now is nobody was talking about being anxious. That was the real thing.
That's it.
Because
That's it. Yep.
When we got all the people in this group, this Facebook group, I was like, holy crap, like everybody is anxious. Like everybody's like hair is falling out. Like is so stressed about taking this exam. And so I ended up striking this chord with people that I just never really anticipated just by making a course that was geared at what I wanted, essentially. And so really the first like 3, 4 months of just talking to all those students, we really co-created a lot of the courses together. Like I would get feedback from people, I'd make adjustments to the videos, like we would maneuver. Like my original course that was 3 hours, I literally like made in a weekend and just like put it up there to see what people would think. I think it's on like its 10th rendition now. Like it's kind of wild. It's been a crazy journey.
An incredible journey.
It's been crazy.
That's an incredible journey.
It's been so fun.
What I like what I like about your journey too is that there's a level of vulnerability and realness that I'm hearing as you were like, I was anxious, I was scared, like walking that student around the building.
Yeah.
Like I can imagine now as she I would just think that'd be such a pivotal moment as a nursing student to have a professor that really just like literally walked along
a support person
and was just like, you're not alone. Yeah, you're not alone. And because of your experience with anxiety and what you went through, it made you that much more able to connect to where people really are. I just think that just makes you so much more marketable as you are more real, more like, hey, I was struggling with this. Like, this was really hard. And people are like, yeah, me too. Like, because that's what we all want, right? We all want to be seen.
Absolutely.
We all want to be known. And then to have somebody step into it with us. And Brene Brown talks about this all the time about vulnerability and why it's so life-changing, because it's at that very moment, right? Like you could have looked down at her in the pot of her anxiety and just been like, must be really hard in there. Good luck. When you're ready, we'll be out here. But you were like, no, I'm going to climb down into the hole with her and I'm going to walk around in the anxiety and I'm going to just sit with her in it. And then I'm going to tell her like, it's not that bad. You're going to be okay. Let's just go out
That's
there.
all I ever needed.
And she was fine. Yeah. And so maybe that was all that you ever needed. Exactly. This headphone is just not working. Maybe that was all that you ever needed. And so, yeah, like see how much better you can give to someone else when you're in touch with what's been going on inside of you and doing that work on your own emotional state. And
I think the transparency part is really important because a lot of people, it was actually really hard for me to say I was really anxious about taking the exam. And it even took me a little bit of time to figure out, even after I made the course, that was inadvertently what I had geared it towards. Like if you had asked me in the very beginning, like I wouldn't have said this is a test anxiety review. I would have said like, this is a really great content review. Like I'm an educator, like I put time into this, all this junk, right? Not this junk. It's a great content review too. But ironically, I was doing a podcast episode last year. I was being interviewed by the Resume RX and she was asking me something I don't even remember now. And it just like clicked in my brain. I was like, why have people latched onto this so much so quickly? I was like, it's all the test anxiety piece. It's all just meeting people where they're at, being really open with how I'm feeling. Like it was even hard for me. I hid my face on my business for a long time just because it was really hard for me to put myself out there like that. Like that is not me. And so like I think it was from like May all the way until March of the following year. No one ever saw my face. Like nobody even knew what I looked like. So that way I could feel open to talk about
beautiful.
things. So it was
oh my God.
It was so intimidating for me. For people, I was like, people are going to think I'm crazy. People are going to think I'm nuts. And I'm like, no, like there are tons of people that are anxious out there, number one. But number two, anxiety can make you a really great provider. And I was like, and I feel like people miss that. And they definitely missed that when I was in school because I became an oncology nurse. And I promise you, like my anxiety helped me. And I saved a lot of patients because I was super diligent all the time. Like I was super aware. So I never want anyone to feel ashamed of their anxiety. It's really important to me. And it was really hard for me to open up, put my face on things, talk about it openly on Instagram. Now, like I could do an Instagram story any moment, be like anxiety. But back then it was really, really tough to be that open and that transparent. But actually one of our core values in my company is transparency, and along with that, empathy as well.
Yeah. We need more of that in the world.
Yes,
we need more people that are being real because it's how we connect.
Yeah.
And I think that there's so much that's wrong and it's so strange because of COVID and how people are now more distant and more separate, and you're more alone with your thoughts, and you're more by yourself, and social distance, 14 feet. And so like all these things, like it's not just a social distance away from people physically, it's also becoming a social distance spiritually, emotionally. Everyone's struggling because they think I'm the only one, because you just live in this little world by yourself. And I think it's so great to bring awareness to the fact that like, hey, listen, like I was actually really good at this, but I was still anxious so many times throughout the process.
Over and over.
But you used your strengths, you used your weaknesses and the things that the world sees as weak as a way to grow a very successful business. You were using the anxiety that you were thought, oh, this is a weakness, this is a chink in my armor, to really be the thing that you're like, no, this is how I connect to people.
Yeah.
Like there's this book by Malcolm Gladwell. It's called David and Goliath. And he talks about the thing that you think makes you strong. Sometimes it's actually the thing that makes you weak.
Yeah.
And the thing that makes you weak is actually the thing that makes you strong. And how in the world of thinking, oh, this, Goliath size strength that I have can actually be the thing that brings you down. But this little tiny David like weakness that you think, oh, this is never going to conquer that big thing, is actually the thing that people connect the most with. So do that. Yeah. Be that little thing that you think nobody will connect to. This is so ugly, nobody wants to see it. It's actually the thing that everybody wants.
You've got to be real. You've got to be authentic. So I think
right.
There's a lot of that in business, and people put on personas. There's no place for that in my business. Like it is, like literally last week, if you had seen my Instagram stories, like we had a tornado cross through, like power lines were down, chaos was happening. So I was like, y'all, I'm supposed to get on here today and talk about my webinar, but we have power lines down, our generator's out, we have baby chicks, like we've got all these things going on right now. So today is not the day to be talking about the webinar. Well, baby chicks, they need their heat. And so without the heat, I mean, it's a whole deal. So I definitely think
put them under your little wings.
I think you have to be really authentic and really real. And that's not something you can overlook either. I think it's so important.
I love that. Man, that is so many nuggets there. And so another thing that I like to talk about on the podcast is, so you didn't always have blue skies, right? Like it wasn't always just rainbows, butterflies, unicorns. Like there were moments you're like, Sarah, this is not working. And this is a moment.
Yep.
We gotta sink or swim or whatever it is. Can you describe maybe a moment that you were like, this might be it. I don't know if I'm going to make it, but you did. And it's even better. Or, whatever. Like if there's some moment like that you can think about.
If I ever write a book someday, which is definitely a goal, because I think everything that's happened to me like in the last 5 years would be really cool for a book. There's a lot of stories I could tell. So if I write a book someday, one of the stories I will definitely tell will be about the first time I tried to get a website done. So I needed a website horribly. I needed to be able to sell stuff without it going through me every single time. It wasn't feasible. It wasn't making sense. I wanted to release more courses, all the things. And so I didn't even have time to look for a website designer. I literally told my husband, I said, find whoever you can on Google. I really don't even care what it looks like. Like if it functions and we can run subscriptions, I'm cool. That's great. And so he found this guy online. He actually found a couple of guys, and we chose the cheapest one because that was how I started my business. I'm like all bare bones, right? Which looking back, what you get for what you pay for. And so we told the guy from the very beginning, like, this is going to be subscription. Here's what we're aiming for, etc. And essentially he had a template. He was just plugging everything in, like all the words. And I wrote all the words for the website myself. So really his big piece was doing the subscriptions. So I geared up myself and my customers for almost a month and a half. Like I've got a website coming. It comes to 3 days before the website's supposed to launch. He tells me that subscriptions are impossible and those will never be able to be done. And nobody else in the industry is doing that. I'm like, well, you're not in my industry anyway, so I don't know what in the world you're talking about. And essentially the whole website imploded. But when I was talking to him about it on the phone, I'm I'm pretty quiet. I'm pretty reserved. I know it probably doesn't feel that way on this podcast today. I've had a lot of caffeine. It was getting kind of heated on the phone. And he told me, he said, if you're too emotional to talk about it, I can just call and talk to your husband later. And I thought my head was going to explode off my body. Like, I don't think I've ever been so angry in my life. I was like, here I've created this successful business. I just want a website to be able to put things out to people. You're telling me subscriptions are impossible. First of all, almost nothing is impossible. Like, impossible is like not even in my vocabulary at this point. Like, impossible doesn't exist to me.
Yes.
And so for them, for you to demean and belittle me like that. And so I told him, I said, I don't care what it is. Take the website down. I don't ever want to speak to you again. You're definitely not speaking to my husband later. I don't want any piece of this, because I can't have people anywhere near my business that A, don't believe in me and my business, but B, also would be so belittling and demeaning either. Like, come on, like, why? Yeah. And there have been a couple of red flags on the way. There have been one point we were talking about the website. He like compared what I was doing to like women that run bake sales, and I was like, that's not it, but thank you. But yeah, basically, me twitching. Essentially, my website was just gone overnight, and we had to start over from scratch, and we had to find somebody else. And so that doesn't sound like a big deal. It was really hard to find somebody else. A,
it's a big deal.
It took another month and a half of time. B, and C, it didn't work when I finally got it up too. So literally at the time, if you canceled your subscription, I would have to go in manually and give you access till the end of your paid month. And that was actually when I about like closed down the business altogether, because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know anything about websites. Now, like, I've created even more work for myself. Like, I'm still talking to all these people just about different things now. And it wasn't a week after that, once I started fixing all these canceled subscriptions every day, that I hired the business coach. Because I was like, if I don't figure something out, like time management wise and just like mental health wise, like no business to me has ever worth sacrificing my mental health, ever. And it was getting to a point I was sacrificing my mental health by running those crazy hours and talking to so many people all the time and dealing with people like that guy. So that for me was a really pivotal point in my business, because number one, I had to have the confidence in myself that I was going to be able to figure it out and tell this guy to just go away, which is really hard. But number two, then to like,
off, bro.
Yeah, really, go away. Please don't ever speak to me again. But number two, having to figure it out after that point, when I've got all these people now that are depending on me and my stuff working. And that was really, really hard, because it was a lot easier when I was just running it for Zoom and I knew for sure it was going to work. It was a whole different ordeal having a website. Painful.
Wow. That is an incredible journey. And, you know, as you're describing it too, I was thinking about the fact that it's a lot of the journeys from entrepreneurs that I hear, there's this moment that just feels like a breaking point. And then they're like, I can't do this anymore. And then something happens and they keep going.
Yeah.
And I love that you say that nothing is impossible. That word is not in your vocabulary, because that, once you get that mindset of like, everything is possible, I can do anything.
I can figure it out.
I just need to open up my mind. I can figure it out. Now you're not afraid. There's no fear in there's fear in the world. There's fear in the word impossible. There's no fear in living in everything is possible. And so I just got to figure it out. And it opens up your mind. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I can figure this out. This is figure outable, or whatever that word is. I can never say it, but everything is figure outable. Right. And so you can figure it out. Don't panic. Don't, just don't give up. Keep going. And yeah, look what you've been able to do if you just kept going. This is just so inspiring, Sarah. I just think it's so incredible. So my last question is, what is a piece of advice for a new nurse that you would say at the beginning, if you were talking to Sarah and she's just anxious and she's just finishing stuff and she's still pushing and she's not sleeping and she's on caffeine and she's doing all her stuff, you were like, piece of advice for her to keep, and a piece of advice you would tell her, toss it. It's garbage. What would you say?
So I always like to remind myself, and I try to remind like my past self too, in a way. You make the best decisions with the information that you have at the time. And so like when I hired that website designer, for example, that was the best information I had at the time. So I think if I could like go back in time, I would just be like, give yourself a little bit of grace. Because I was so hard on myself, especially in the beginning. And even today, I'm still hard on myself. Like, it's not like it magically went away, like I'm successful. But always my biggest piece of advice to people getting going, other than just get started. I hate to say that because I feel like it's like generic and cliche. But oh my God, please just get started. Whatever it is you want to do. Like, people get lost in analysis paralysis. Like, just put it out there, see what happens. It will be messy. It won't be perfect. And my first course, I felt like was perfect. It was messy. It was messy all the way around, but it was fun. And we figured it out. And as it grew, we remaneuvered and all those things. But give yourself grace for it to be a little bit messy. Give yourself some grace to make some mistakes along the way, because they're going to happen no matter what, especially if you're new in business. I knew nothing about business. I'm still learning about business every day. Like, I'm always trying to absorb more information, but it just comes along with time. And then to delete, that one's a little bit harder. I think in a lot of ways, kind of to tie back to what I was already kind of saying too, the delete the analysis paralysis, number one, just throw something out there, but also delete the being so hard on yourself. I think part of why we are so hard on ourselves is we've spent all this time, all this money, we've got all this education. It feels like there's all this just pressure all the time, but there doesn't have to be this level of pressure. And so that's really up for you to decide how you want to maneuver that. But I think I answered your question. I got a little bit on a tangent there, but analysis paralysis.
No. I think you did. Yeah. And I think that what you're saying is you've got to look and see what life looks like for you. Like, you can't judge that based on other people and what they decide looks like success.
Yeah,
and so you said something, and again, the last part of the interview is the rapid fire questions. Ooh. And so I want to ask you maybe rapid firely, I do my rapid fire questions. There it is. I have to do the echo part. It has to be dramatic. But I want to ask you, what does success look like to you? Because you just said that word. You said, now that I'm successful, but like, what does that, how do you define that? Just if you can just spit out like what it looks like. Is it a number for you? Is it a lifestyle for you? What is it? What does success look like to Sarah Michelle?
I always thought success was
and that's
a number.
My rapid fire, which is, sorry.
No, you're good.
Sorry. I'm quiet.
I always thought success was a number. Always. I'm like, when I hit this. Success is not a number. Success is, for me personally, time, freedom, and time flexibility, and getting to do the things that I want to do with my time and setting my own day. So like last week when the tornado hit, I took a couple of days off, and that was okay to do because I had the flexibility to do so. And so working in that grind and having 2 full-time jobs and doing all that stuff, I never had any freedom of time, and it drove me nuts and it made me insane. And so I think that's what I was craving so badly, and I think it's part of why I love business so much.
Guys, I know that was a heavy rapid fire, but I really wanted to hear that because I was like, that was a heavy rapid fire. So that couldn't be rapid, but it was perfect. And so rapid fire, here we go. What is your favorite animal?
Ooh, favorite animal? I would say I'm biased right now. It's probably my baby chicks.
Oh, your baby chicks right now. And okay, what are you watching on Netflix and chill? Like, do you Netflix and chill? And if you do, what are you watching?
We're watching Still Magnolias right now, and we kind of rotate through. We also did Love is Blonde. I like things I don't really have to think about to watch. Like, I like fun things to watch. So we watched a lot of Love is Blonde here recently.
Yeah, is that one show where they like get married, they start dating behind the door or something like that, and then they like meet? Yeah, the pods. Yeah, that's such a crazy show. I think there was one season where like the girl was so horrible that like people made memes about her, like that she was like
season 1.
I remember. Yes. Oh my gosh, that show is so much fun. Yeah, I could totally see why you'd watch that, and then you don't have to think. It literally is just brainless. You just sit there and you're like, okay, this is great, very entertaining. Well, thank you for your time today, Sarah. This has been, you've dropped so many nuggets, so many truth bombs. I know people are going to get something out of everything that you said today. Do you want to do a shameless plug? Let people know where to find you, where they can get your content, all the things that you're involved in.
Well, thank you so much for listening to me and all of my caffeine tangents this morning. So you can follow me at Sarah Michelle MP on Instagram. That's probably my favorite spot for you to follow me. I feel like that's where I get to connect the most through stories and stuff. But you can also check out our student Facebook group, which is literally called like Sarah Michelle Study Group. So you can find that really easily. And you can also connect through my website, which is www.mpreviews with an S.com, not mpreview, mpreviews.com, plural. But those are all the ways to get into contact with me.
Perfect. And it was a website made by someone who is not a misogynist.
Yes, no, absolutely. They have a wonderful website team now.
I'm just kidding. I had to throw that in there. No, I might take that out. I don't know. I might leave it. I don't know. Who knows? Anyway,
no, I love it.
I had so much fun, Sarah. Thank you for your time today. And guys, don't forget to enjoy the journey of your career. Thanks for hanging out.
Thank you.